Hi, I'm Ashleigh. Welcome to Tea Table Talk. I'm delighted to be here with a new series. This year, we're going to be focusing on human nature interconnectedness primarily. And I'm delighted to start this series off with a wonderful guest called Skye Marie Buitenhuis. And today we're going to be talking about ecological homecoming. Hi, Skye.
Hi, Ashleigh.
Welcome, and thank you so much for joining Tea Table Talk.
Thanks. It's so nice to spend a little bit of time with you on such a beautiful day.
What a fantastic
Where we both get to be outside. Yeah.
Well, I'm really excited to find out more about what ecological homecoming is. So I suppose the main question is, what is it?
It's a phrase that came to me last year. And it's something that I really dedicate my work to, about returning home, this feeling of returning home to greater nature. And really that's what it is. It's a felt sense in the body of I'm safe here, I'm welcome, I belong here in greater nature. So not just in our own human homes where we might know that feeling from, but greater nature. And it's really that returning to that sense of kinship with the whole natural world that was cut really at the beginning of modern society, when that cord with the rest of nature was cut. And really that's the place that I see so much destruction coming from in our modern world, when we don't identify with greater nature anymore. So yeah.
Wow. And you have a course coming up in Ecological Homecoming really soon.
Yeah, it's a year-long course starting on March 18th. Yeah, going around the cycle of the year. So beginning in the east, where spring begins, and the new cycle of life begins, and following it the whole way through to the end of next winter, really. And really helping people to have that experience in their own home places, because it's an online course. So the way I've experienced ecological homecoming in my life is that it's like a feeling, a kinship just with nature as a whole. But then also when we practice some of these core routines of nature connection that we'll be exploring in our home places, that's when a really kind of deep taproot, if you will, goes in our own bioregions as well. Like, so for example, learning your native bird species, but also maybe even learning the individual birds that are where you live.
So it sounds like it's a really deep kind of connection with nature, and really observing the world around you, and learning more about it and how it connects with you.
Yeah, definitely. And yeah, I'm glad you used that word, observe, because I think that's sorry, I just have to pause the breaks that are happening, my mindfulness breaks on my computer. Okay. Yeah, because so often we have that kind of, a lot of the way people might connect to nature is through nature education, where we learn facts about nature like we would in school, like in the classroom, for example. And then another way is to go out and observe nature. So there's still kind of this separation, it's like I'm here and I'm observing this over there. But really, ecological homecoming is about how can I be in reciprocal experiencing. So this sense of like, I'm experiencing nature, feeling it in my body, and the rest of nature is also experiencing me. And there's this reciprocity in communication, really. And like, I remember for myself, when I started transitioning to more connecting more in that way, I'd known the concept for quite some time of Mother Earth, but it was an intellectual concept for me. And then when I learned the practices to actually go out and really feel the support in my body, for my, like, the emotional support. So like, as a species of this planet, we get everything from the earth. So we're wholly supported by the earth. But I think, again, that cord that I mentioned that was cut quite some time ago, I think at the beginning of modern society, we can forget that. We've actually forgotten that, even intellectually, a lot of the time. And emotionally, it's often not there. And so it went into my body, like feeling that emotional support from the earth as well. It's really sense of like, wow, this is my mother. Like I really receive everything and this care and this nourishment and this well-being and not just my practical needs.
Wonderful. Yeah. And I think even as you said that, we see nature in a sense as our needs, our practical needs. How can it feed us? How can it nourish us? Um, but you're really talking there, it feels like, about that, really that interconnected relationship, that we are one, we are connected. Um,
Yeah, yeah, absolutely.
you're reminding.
Yeah, and that greater identity that comes from that connection. Like it's not just, I would say, if ecological homecoming is dedicated to anything, it's dedicated to reawakening the ecological self. So when we feel those positive emotional connections with greater nature, we start to identify our sense of self literally gets bigger. We're living from that place of connection. And we make different choices from that place of connect, that living embodied state. From that connection, we make different choices in our life because, of course, we don't want to harm what we love and care for. Yeah.
You're reminding me of when I lived in Africa, and I spent a lot of time at the seaside and looking at, at the sunset. And I remember the first time I think I experienced what you're exactly describing, that ecological homecoming, where I was just breathing and, slowing down at the end of the day. And then suddenly my breath became the same as the sea was washing out and washing back. And I just felt completely part of the earth. And with every sound that the waves made, my breath seemed to be 100% connected. And it was a very profound experience at the time, because it was the first time that I really felt like I'm not in my body per se. I am connected to the beach, to the waves, to the sea, and each breath was the same breath.
Yeah. And how did that, like, just hearing you say that was a really profound experience. And I really resonate with that too for myself, and how I've heard other people speak to those kinds of moments as well. And like, I'm curious how did that change who you are having an experience like that? And I don't mean what you do out in the world necessarily, just who you are as a person.
Well, it made me very much more alive to nature around me, and I instantly was calm. And I still to this day find that the for me to be centered, to be focused, to be any of that is to bring myself back to that place of breath, where I'm breathing with the world, with the trees, with the land. Yeah, for me, it all came back to that idea of life is breath. And with every unfurl of a leaf, the plants are breathing, the earth is breathing. Just it really made me realize of that interconnectedness, and it's something that has stayed with me. Every time I pick a flower, I think, I'm conscious of it. Every time I walk on the thread on the ground, I'm much more observant of what am I standing on, how am I walking on the earth. It really did open up a much more awareness of my surroundings.
Yeah.
That I'm just an entity within it. I think as humans, we can sometimes tread quite heavily on the earth. And it is about, what can I take? What do I need? Whereas, yeah, it just awoken, a whole other sense of it.
Yeah. It's funny, I was thinking about that. I was going to talk to you later this morning, and I opened this book that I'm reading at the moment every morning, and it's just like 2 or 3 pages about something and then a reflection. And so I read a few pages. It's from Tara Brach, called Trusting the Gold. And just so happens this morning she was talking about this very thing. And it was lovely. And her words were a shared sense of aliveness and sentience with the world, which I thought was just so lovely, that shared sense of sentience.
Yeah.
That's really, captures it for me. And her invitation at the end of the reflection was to have a walk outside, and just every kind of being you encounter just to pause and say, we are friends. And then to just see how that, how that lands, how that feels in your body, to make that acknowledgement. That was really lovely.
Wonderful. Well, I'm very excited to hear more about the course, and it's a year-long course. So what will people expect on the course? Like what will happen? What will people do? I'm sure it'll be an individual journey for everyone, but
yeah, definitely, like individual and collective. Yeah, I mean, so it's based on something called the 8 Shields map of deep nature connection and cultural repair. And that was founded by a man called John Young, who basically was working with different Indigenous elders from different cultures and recording what he was seeing as the common practices that all the Indigenous cultures he was encountering had, because he was asking the question of, there's so much disconnection to self, to our fellow human beings, and to greater nature in modern Western culture. And he was really asking himself, well, when I'm with these Indigenous cultures, they seem to have really good connection to self and each other and greater nature. So what is it that they're doing that we're not? And so he started mapping these practices. And there's many cultural elements, lots of different things, but actually they're all based on a foundation of a living connection with nature. So what he also did was he identified what kind of nature connection practices are they all doing. So this is what this is based on. So in this map, we've put one of these core nature connection practices in each of the 8 points as we go around the wheel of the year. And so each time we meet up, which is 2 1.5 hour long calls spread out over 2 weeks around that core time of year. So we start in the spring equinox, we go through Buitenhuis here, then we have the summer solstice, then we go through Lunasa next, then we have our autumn equinox, then we go through Samhain, we go through the winter solstice, and then through Imbolc. And so we have one of these core routines that we explore for a couple of weeks on each of those. And so it's really a chance to, in community and with support of wonderful mentors, Amy and Dan, who I'll be the host along with my colleague Peter, but we have these 2 wonderful nature connection mentors guiding the journey. So they'll be introducing one of these core practices. So for example, in the East, we're going to be starting with Sit Spot. And Sit Spot is this really such a simple routine, but life-changing. I've thought a lot of people to be forest therapy guides. It's something I've done a lot of in the last 8 years. And in the 6-month practicum for that training, they do a Sit Spot for 6 months. And I've gotten to mentor a lot of people while they do that. And it's the foundation of creating that deeper connection for them. And it's just a place we choose somewhere, and we return there a few times a week, different times a day through the seasons. And we just, as much as we can, drop out of the mind into the rest of the body through our senses, and just be in living, curious connection with what is happening around you. And it's just one thing that's so noticeable is how quickly this spot becomes really special and starts to feel like home, like really fast. And I suppose if I ask myself right now, why is that? I just think we're so hungry for this. And, when we choose somewhere that just feels good to our bodies, nature is just such a healing, therapeutic place to be in. And so we just so resonate with that experience. I think our whole human body is just like, yes, and just so, I suppose, wired for that, really. And so it's really a beautiful thing.
And actually, when we were talking earlier about doing this session in the tea table talk, we talked about how wonderful it would be to be outside, because we're talking about nature. And I actually was contemplating exactly, I suppose, what you were saying. That's Sit Spot, and where in the garden would be a good place. And as I'm sitting here, I've sat here a number of times before, and again, each time I come here, I'm realizing it's becoming more familiar. It's feeling more like home. I'm observing things in a deeper way. Like the first time you sit, you're looking around and you're like this little child excited. Oh, look at this, look at that. And then you start to notice maybe creatures that are living around that sit spot, or the textures on the plants or the trees that are within that. So each time you return to that sit spot, I can only imagine that you become much more deeper and deeper connected with yourself, with what's around you. I think this is going to be one of my sit spots, which is a lovely concept that I hadn't really heard of before. This idea of returning to a place.
And it's like what happens when we bring intentionality to it, I guess, because it's lovely to hear that you have a sit spot really in your garden already. And I think a lot of people do when they have that time in their life and they have the access to somewhere. People often have a spot. It's such a natural thing, to have that spot you love to go and sit in, because there's just something about that place. That place has something that you need, whatever that might be, because that's different for different people. Although science is honing in on some of these kind of particular measurable factors, I suppose, in nature, like the sound of running water, or like the sound of gently running water versus rushing water, or there's studies done on, what's the idea, what kind of percentage of canopy do we feel most relaxed in, things like that. Like actually deep dark forests aren't as relaxing for us as dappled sunlight forests are, for example. And so science is also kind of looking into some of this stuff, but which is really interesting. And I think personally there's something about when it all comes together that's just immeasurable in the end as well. And that's just where the mystery comes in, and it's the undefinable elements of connection.
Excuse me, my cat has just come. She I think she likes this sit spot too.
She looks lovely. It makes me want a cat on my lap.
She loves joining the tea table too.
I bet she's warm from the sun too. Yeah.
That's good. Yeah, she has I've noticed she has a sit spot as well in the garden, that she tends to go back to. I think we could learn a lot as well from observing the other animals and creatures in nature. And
there's an invitation I often do in my nature connection work, is just like it's called a sense room, and just finding a place that feels like a room for you. It's often in the forest or in the woodlands I'm doing this work, and so people go somewhere that just feels right for them, that they feel like there's a sense in their body that they've entered a particular place, and then they spend some time there. They have a sit spot in that place, and they might, I might guide them to notice particular things, and then when we all come back together as a group, we actually go and visit people's sense rooms, and it's so revealing, because people have chosen really different places, and sometimes I ask them to put if you had a name for your sense room, and one person will have found a playground where they were like having fun in. Another person has found a temple, and they're just like in this, like having a lovely, what they might identify with as a spiritual experience for them. And someone else found a mossy rock and they just had a nap for 20 minutes. And it's so revealing, because you see exactly what people were needing. Like people go and find that space that they were needing. And that's such a beautiful thing, that people can do that. And what a beautiful thing to get to witness in each other as well.
So do you believe then that say where you would pick that sensory room could be very different depending on, say, the time of the year or the state of your mind at the time?
I think so. I definitely, because whenever I kind of give people an invitation to find a spot, I always tell them to find a spot that just feels good for them. Whether they understand why or not doesn't matter. but just that feels good to them and their bodies. And I think that changes, because sometimes we need rest, for example. We don't always need rest. Sometimes we really need to be held, we just want to be in spot that feels really cozy, and like you can just tuck yourself in, beside a tree or something. And other times we want to, maybe, and I'm sure it's to do with like what you said as well, what the opportunities are and what's happening on the land. Like if it's a beautiful summer day and the light is dancing through the leaves on the forest floor, I'm sure that brings out playfulness in people as well, and maybe they're more likely to, to just kind of connect with their childlike joy when they're there.
Yeah, you're right. Actually, now that you're saying that, I'm thinking whenever I want to be calm and breathe and connected, I always want to go back to the ocean, because I suppose that's where that was first triggered for me.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's times when you go, I really need to go to a forest, and there's, as you said, a different energy about that. Or and sometimes, yeah, you want to find that mossy ground, which is like a blanket of just pure comfort. And yeah, as you said, sometimes like frolicking in the autumn leaves is awakens that childlike. So you are totally right that
Yeah. And I think different ecosystems evoke different things for people as well. And I think that can be a personality thing, but I think there's also some fairly universal things in humans probably. Like I know for me, one of my favorite places to be is in a meadow in the summertime, when it's, a sunny day and the grass is all high and there's just loads of insects and butterflies, and I just love lying back in that and looking up at the sky. And it has a very particular feeling. It's like a sense of expansiveness, relaxation, and a particular kind of oneness, I suppose, the oneness of feeling together with these insects and plants that are ripe. Like there's a ripening in that, the tall grasses, and
yeah. But it sounds like a perfect time to be doing a course like this, not only because of where we are in the world at the moment, but also the start of spring. And it sounds like a wonderful journey that people are going to go on, including myself. I'm delighted to say that I'm going to be joining the Ecological Homecoming as well. And I'm so excited because it's, it's looking in the garden, it is springtime, and the way you described that we're going to go right around from east to south to west to north, and do the whole cycle of the seasons as well, and connecting with all the really important equinoxes. I think sounds like it's going to be a really, really wonderful journey. I'm going to put the link down at the bottom so people can get access to the website as well, so they can book. So again, just to remind us, when does it start?
So it starts the evening of March. I think I said March 18th earlier. It's March 31st. That was something else. That was so imprinted in my brain. It's Thursday, March 31st. And it's lovely what you just said too, because it's true. It's like that time of year where we are called to go outside again. We're awakening as well out of our winter selves. And there is that aspect. The core routines track that time of year as well. Like, for example, the south is holistic tracking, which is around summer solstice. So it's the tracking, it's track and sign of animals, but it's also learning about yourself in that process. That's why it's called holistic tracking. But that's the time of year when there's, it's peak energy. So like, animals are out and about, they're doing their thing, so it's a wonderful time to learn more about their movements and what they might be up to. And then when we're in the north, we're going to focus a bit on survival skills, because it's in the winter time where we need to be most organized and aware, actually. Not so much now when we're in our comfortable houses that have a similar environment the whole way through the year, but when we were more living outside and more dependent on like wild crafting and foraging and things like that, that was the time of year like you really needed to be organized and know how you were going to do things. And so we're like focusing on how to create a fire and shelter using wild materials in the north. And then in Imbolc, so when we come all the way around, it's bird language, because that's the time of year all the birds start to sing again. Yeah, which is such a beautiful, yeah, that's like the awakening really happens with the birds way before we see much signs in the plants. So yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I can hear them now. They're chirping so much louder now than they were a month ago. They're
Yeah,
calling us to wake up, have a look at nature.
yeah,
You know?
yeah, yeah, yeah. And there's many birds that don't migrate, but they don't really sing in the winter. And it's like, those are the things, it's like the more we understand about our ecology, the more exciting it is, really. You know, we start to notice all of these things that are happening around us all the time anyway, but we just may never have noticed them. And there's there's just such a wonder and a joy in that. Yeah, I love that.
Yeah, me too. Me too. Well, Sky, thank you so much for joining us for the Tea Table Talk. Again, Ecological Homecoming, highly recommend people take a look at the website, link down below. 31st of March it starts. And Sky, I really hope you'll come back during this series so we can talk more about nature and interconnectedness and more ecological homecoming conversation.
Thanks, Ashleigh. Yeah, thanks so much. It's been really nice to talk. And yeah, I'd love to talk again. Maybe sometime in person with a cup of tea outside.
You always have to have a cup of tea with Tea Table Talk. It's part of the rules, and I'm highly excited because there was a plant in our garden that my mother-in-law gave me, just like lemon balm, and I thought it had died, and suddenly it was in a pot, and suddenly the whole pot is flourished again, and then
yeah,
there's sprigs of it now going into our grass. So I thought I'd make a cup of tea with that today. So
there's just a you know, right before I talked to you, I was in the garden pruning a crabapple tree, but right before that I was cutting back all the lemon balm so that all the new spring growth could come through better. Yeah, so that's lovely to hear.
Well, thank you so much, and we'll chat again.
All right, thanks, Ashleigh. Enjoy the lovely weather.
Thank you.